All right, well, let's get this show on the road. That's Dr. Kristin Baier, you guys. Go check her out over on Instagram, Doctoring Keto. And I've known you for a few years, Kristin. You're a board-certified obesity medicine specialist, a family medicine doctor. You just made a big move out to San Diego, and you're a part of all the fun at low-carb MD San Diego. And if you do that.com, that's how you find the website. You guys, do you see virtual patients as well, or is it only in the San Diego area?
Yeah, we are all set up to see virtual patients. Kind of the red tape limiting our potential to treat everyone is state medical licensing,
Yeah.
which has been relaxed a little bit with COVID. But right now I am licensed in Illinois and California, so I can see patients virtually or in person from those states, and I have my Texas medical license pending. So hopefully that comes through in the next month or so, and I'll be able to start seeing people from Texas.
So I understand they try to keep it where people can't just willy-nilly medical anybody, but it's kind of weird. And definitely you're right. COVID has kind of opened up the doors of opportunity. Hey, we probably should try to do something about making accessibility to medical care a little easier, especially in the people freaking out about being around other people. Do you sense that's kind of a move that's happening, or are those parameters in place for a good reason?
No, I do. I would love to see there be kind of like a national license
Yeah,
opposed to individual state licenses. It's really, if you're qualified in one state, you should be
yeah,
qualified to practice medicine in any state and having kind of the standard of care. It all comes down to money. States are not going to give up their fees, and I mean, it's ridiculous how much we spend every year, every 2 years to renew our license, renew our controlled substance license,
right.
DEA license, everything. And it's a pain to be blunt to keep trying to apply to different states. But it seemed like at the beginning of COVID, they immediately relaxed things, and then now they're starting to tighten up again. I was hoping it would permanently change things for the better, but it doesn't appear that's happening.
Well, it's the money thing, Kristen. You would think, hey, we got the whole country involved. There's a huge pool of doctors because there's only a limited number of doctors, especially in smaller states, to be certified. Like here in South Carolina, it's a smaller state. And so don't you want a doctor in California to be able to like practice with patients in South Carolina? Plus, that eases up patient load of some of the doctors in this area. I don't know. It just seems no brainer to me.
Yeah, it absolutely does, especially today where there's functional medicine and alternative medicine. Then you have someone like my partner and I that focus on metabolic health and low carb diets. Not every state or city offers those kind of practitioners. So giving patients an opportunity to explore healthcare providers out of state seems like it would be common sense, but apparently the government does not see it the same way.
Oh my gosh. I think if I've gotten one kind of email over the years, and I've done this over 15 years now, if I've gotten one kind of email, it's like, can you help me find a low carb doctor in? And then they fill in the blank city. I think one recently about Tampa, Florida. And I'm just like, because I know guys, I know all of you guys, but you're like so scattered. And I think there's only like one or two that does like a little more than a couple of states. And so it's frustrating for patients because they want the help and they want the guidance that you, and it's Brian's your partner, right?
Yep, yep.
Brian, say his last name.
Lenskis?
Lenskes, that's right. I
Mhm.
was on the Low Carb MD podcast, which is the podcast he does with Dr. Tro, but I can never say Lenskes. So,
It's a mouthful. And so, bringing it up, one way some practitioners are getting around the state medical licensing requirements is to call their services health coaching.
yeah,
Uh, which is a gray area, and it's working well for some people, but they are then limited to what they can and cannot do. They can't manage medications. They
right.
can't necessarily order certain tests and things. They can refer people and recommend, like, these are the labs I would
Yeah.
suggest, I'll look over labs. But yeah, that is one way some people are getting around it. So it depends how much care you feel like you need, how much oversight you want to have. If it's like just the consult because you just want to make sure you're doing everything right for your health, then yeah, that is fine. But if you need someone to be prescribing your insulin and your blood pressure medications and all of that, you probably need someone who actually has their medical license in that state.
It's so funny they have that parameter in place. And yet the reason why you and Brian are in practice is doctors don't really know a lot about like metabolic health and the connection to food, and they don't really understand insulin because they've not been trained. And yet how many doctors are now going to be promoting this brand new 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans, which is atrocious, by the way. People go look it up. It really hasn't changed that much, but they totally ignored all the efficacy of science as it relates to saturated fat over the past decade. I've watched it unfold, and it's right there. It's right there to see, but they don't want to look at it. They've also ignored every weight loss study looking at low-carb ketogenic diets. They're not looking at any kind of disease. They designed it specifically just for healthy people. What percent of the population is that, Kristin? Like 12%?
Exactly, Jimmy, 12% from the last study, meaning 88% of the population in this country is metabolically unhealthy and do need interventions beyond the atrocious dietary guidelines that just came out.
Yeah, and look at doctors. That's the default. I can't tell you how many doctors I've been to see over the years because I've had extra weight on my body, and they're like, "Oh, you should probably try to lose weight, and here's the official guidelines." And like, how many doctors are just parroting this, assuming under the guise of, well, the USDA had a very prestigious panel of advisory committee members, never mind their interest in big food and big pharma. There's so many sordid ties. It's why people like you and Brian exist, trying to educate people where they've been miseducated all these years.
Yes, exactly. We wanted to do something a little different where we could really focus on the patient and their health and not just throw medications and guidelines at them, which have been largely ineffective. The medications overall work, they do what they're supposed to do, but they don't address the underlying problem of how we got there in the first place, which is
Yeah.
what we're really trying to do as well. So, and half of my day, okay, maybe that's an exaggeration, not half of my day, but I spend a good chunk of my time educating my patients, other doctors. For example, I had to follow up with a cardiologist one of my patients saw yesterday who told her keto's horrible. And after 3 months, your cholesterol's going to go through the roof. You're going to develop heart disease. It's not sustainable. You should go back to eating quinoa. Literally, that was the advice the cardiologist said. Despite the fact she had lost almost 40 pounds, her
Wow.
lipid panel has improved and her insulin has dropped. And we got her off of an antidepressant medication. So there's tons of room for education, not just with patients and, mainstream media, but with other healthcare providers as well.
Well, and there's the disconnect. Like you, Brian, Eric Westman, Adam Nally. I could go down the list of all my friends. Jeffrey Gerber. I'm insulting a bunch of them by not saying their name, but you know who you are out there. I don't need to say your name. Have basically opened your eyes, educated yourself, and learned, even though you were traditionally trained as medical doctors, you've now understood this intricate connection between the food and how it makes you feel and how it impacts you hormonally, all the things. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it, it's difficult when doctors stay in their little element of what I like to call like the factory patient, where it's 6 minutes out, 6 minutes out, 6 minutes out. And that's not the style that you and Brian have set up in your new clinic.
Correct. Yeah, and it's not to defend all doctors, but they are incredibly busy. It is hard staying current with all the guidelines and recommendations and new medications. And unfortunately, hospital administrators and insurance companies largely dictate their
Yeah.
schedule. They tell them how many patients they have to see, how much time they have with patients, and it's really failing the general public. Health is spiraling out of control, and disease is increasing with every passing year. So Brian and I, we have a membership-based practice, direct primary care and medical weight loss, where you pay a monthly membership fee, and it includes access to us at all time through email, through text message, calling the office. You get your appointments within a day whenever requested. And it's nice because it allows us to practice medicine the way it should be intended, which is patient focused. I can spend an hour with the new patient and we can go over their diet and their lifestyle and what needs to be tweaked. Whereas when you have 6 minutes, you sure don't get a chance to talk about it. You tell them to go read those dietary guidelines.
I have talked to so many medical doctors over the years on this show, and they have all said that before they found a low carbohydrate kind of diet, they were frustrated because they'd go to work and have to do the same old methods that they knew really weren't really helping their patients. Maybe there was a medication that was providing, like you said earlier, somewhat of a benefit, but it was kind of masking the real symptoms of what was going on. And then they start practicing adding in the nutrition element, and they come in because they're taking patients off of medicines. They're lowering insulin, on and on and on, and they're actually seeing patients get better. There's an excitement level there. So the burnout factor for all these doctors, I would think that's the selling point.
Yeah, that absolutely helps. It makes our work enjoyable again and gives us hope and optimism that we're actually making a positive impact in patients' lives and their health, and giving them the energy and stamina to do the things they want to do again, have the energy to play with their grandkids, to go for a hike, to travel, all of that, which people don't realize as we age. Not everyone can do that when they're weighed down by their diabetes and obesity and heart failure. So it is rejuvenating for the medical provider to see patients actually getting better and deprescribing medication.
Well, and I think we're kind of in a transition period when it comes to how medical doctors are perceived. The older generation, which is like our mom and dads, kind of in the baby boomer-ish area of age of life, they seem to be extremely trusting still of the medical profession. White coat syndrome, I suppose, is what it's called. I'm Gen X, and so we're a little more, like it's half and half. I think there's a certain segment of Gen X that's like, yeah, I'm going to trust, and then some others are kind of rebellious. No, I'm not going to trust. Millennials totally off the rails, don't trust the system at all. So how do you kind of help those patients trust you more?
Right. That is a great question because I do have a lot of patients who are extremely skeptical. They've been hearing about cholesterol and the link with heart disease for their entire lives. And you shouldn't eat eggs and red meat or bacon and all of that. And really, I have to go through, I explained the whole insulin model of obesity, as well, what insulin is, what insulin resistance is, how that affects your cholesterol, how that affects your kidney function and your blood pressure, and everything that intertwines in that. And I think educating the patient and giving them resources, pointing to good podcasts and websites and books. And some of them do like to see the studies. So, we have studies that we can refer to them as well. And then kind of planting the seed about starting to think how the guidelines actually came to be. Where is the money? What are the influential factors? And, all the corruption that has gone into our medical and nutritional recommendations for the
Yeah.
past few decades.
Well, and in the recommendations, and quite frankly, in the science, a lot of the research studies, and by the way, guys, when you go follow her over on Instagram, she does a wonderful job at Doctoring Keto of highlighting what the good research is. Occasionally, you'll post a bad one and say this is what's bad, but most of the time, when you post really cool studies. In fact, sometimes I learn about studies following your feed, and then I do a Jimmy Rants episode about it. So thank you for that, by the way. I
Oh,
try to
good.
stay on the cutting edge, and I know you're one of the go-tos that stays on top of the science. But science has been way, way perverted, way influenced by industry, and people just hear study or science. The science says, a study says, without really digging deeper into what kind of study, who funded the science. Like, all of that matters.
Yes, that's such a good point. I mean, pretty much anyone can get their quote research published anywhere now. And even some of the more prestigious journals out there, like New England Journal of Medicine, they are heavily influenced and biased by funding and things as well. So they're selective in what they even choose to print if it doesn't fit their agenda necessarily. So you really do have to comb through the research, check the funding. Kind of look at the authors and the researchers' bias, where their previous stance has been. Are they cherry picking the data to create this illusion that their research, fits their hypothesis? And then there's epidemiological studies, which are not meant to be the foundation or basis for guidelines. They're meant to be an area to identify an association, and then you do a high quality trial, like a randomized control trial. And unfortunately, so many of the nutritional guidelines are based on epidemiology, kind of a correlation, but not causation. And that is just really, really unfortunate.
And it's those kinds of observational studies that get all the big splash headlines. Red meat increases all cause mortality. And people are like, oh my God, I'm going to die if I eat steak tonight. That's not what it's saying, people.
Yeah. And not even like to go down this rabbit hole, but the confounding variables with all these red meat studies. They're, comparing people who are eating processed food with their red meat. They're eating the hamburger bun, they're eating the
Yes.
French fries fried in vegetable oils. They're drinking that with a large Coke. They're eating their cake for dessert and the steak and potato together. It just like there's so many flaws with the system. I get worked up even thinking about it.
Same with the high fat studies. Usually the fat in those studies is a very inferior fat. A lot of times it's seed oils. And so it's like, we don't recommend seed oils. We recommend butter, coconut oil, lard, real fats, like real food-based fats. And you don't really see those tested apart from carbohydrate. It's always that and carbohydrate. And I know Dr. Feynman, Richard Feynman for many years has said, oh, well, carbohydrate in the presence of, or fat in the presence of carbohydrate is a far different beast than fat in the absence of carbohydrate. It's a hugely different metabolic reaction.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I'll tell people, like, if a patient comes to me and they tell me they're vegan, I will work with them. I'm not saying everyone has to eat red meat. I personally do, and I think it's the most nutrient dense form of food available. But you can be high fat and low carb, or you can be high carb, low fat. The combination of high fat and high carb together is not good for your metabolic health, for weight. And we're also seeing issues with the gut microbiome, which is kind of like the wild, wild west, really an emerging area of lots of research that we're just barely starting to understand and extremely complex. But just the effect on your gut microbiome of fat and carbs together seems to be very detrimental to gut health, leaky gut, and things like that.
Well, and a good way to explain it to people is fat and carbohydrates are both fuel sources. And so choose fat or choose carbohydrate, but don't choose both, because then you're doubling up on your fuel sources. So no wonder you gain weight. No wonder you have a bad metabolic response. No wonder your hormones go out of control. You're eating both sources of fuel at the same time. Now you can have a little bit of one, but when the preponderance of the diet is both, that's when it becomes a problem. So pick your poison, like you said, high fat, moderate protein, low carb, or higher carb, moderate protein, lower fat. Like, if you're gonna do higher carb, you better be eating low fat.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the attention that ketogenic diets are getting lately, and I think it's really helping to propel the movement forward. But it also leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation where people don't understand the physiology of ketosis and what a ketone is, and they think they can be quote keto and eat high fat Monday through Thursday, and they're eating all the butter and cheese and steak that they want. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're drinking beer and wine and eating crackers and cookies and chips and ice cream and pasta. And that is really a recipe for disaster.
Well, and this whole idea of keto foods. Keto is not describing a food. Keto is a metabolic state. And so when people say, well, that's not keto, and I'm thinking, okay, it might be inducive for ketosis in someone who's maybe an athlete who could have maybe a few more carbohydrates. Maybe in you, it doesn't produce ketones, but you can't say it's keto or not keto. And I think that's one of the big mistakes the keto community has made. Well, they're describing foods as keto. Food isn't keto. Your body is what turns into ketosis.
Right. And it's just become such a fad or a catchphrase, keto, and people, like you said, they don't understand it is a metabolic state. And the other funny thing is, so many of these medically supervised weight loss programs like Medifast and OptiFast, you check their ketone levels. Those patients are in ketosis, but those same doctors will shun ketogenic diets by mainstream
Yeah.
standards. Anything that limits your carbohydrates um, can definitely put you into ketosis depending on some other factors as well. But keto does not mean you're eating high fat. It means your body is burning fat for fuel, usually from carbohydrate deprivation.
And anything that limits your calories will also
Mm-hmm.
induce ketosis. Because you think about it, if it's a very low calorie diet, and I've heard 500 to 700 calories a time, that's still not a whole lot of carbohydrates, even if its preponderance of that nutrition is carbohydrate. So it's still carbohydrate restricted, but it's everything restricted.
Yeah, exactly. And what seems to be the foundation of every diet, I think we kind of get into a gray area in the keto community, is the need for protein and how much protein is too much, how much is too little. I personally believe while someone is becoming fat adapted, which I say give it a good 3 months, a solid 12 weeks of no cheating, no going off the rails, sticking with, less than 30 grams of carbohydrates typically a day. Um, be high fat during that time while your body's getting used to burning fat for fuel. But then I find for those who have repaired some of their metabolic dysfunction, kind of backing off of the fat and focusing more on protein, where you're going to maybe 30% protein in the diet, they tend to do really well. And for whatever reason, that just tends to go over better when I talk to specialists and other primary care doctors. If you say we're focusing on protein and healthy fats and lower carb, then they're completely fine. But if you say, oh, we're educating patients on keto, it's who knows what type of reaction you're going to get.
Although, having been in this industry for a very long time, when I first came in, Kristin, it wasn't the fat they were scared of. It was the high protein Atkins diet. So the negativity towards protein was really strong in the aughts. So when all through the 2000s, it was like high protein going to lead to cancer, going to lead to kidney disease, going to lead to. And so I think because there was such a vilification of the protein in the diet, in the 2000s, that when we came to the 2010s, that's when Nina Teicholz's book came, and some of the other books came out that were saying fat's not so bad. So then it started getting some good press, and so, oh my gosh, we have to vilify fat now. And so it's very interesting how all of that has evolved over the years.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And just to clarify for anyone who's out there listening, if you have end stage renal disease, I'm not recommending a high protein diet. But yeah, you're right. What we vilify kind of changes throughout the years. It definitely changes, and I'm sure it'll go back and forth multiple times, again and again. And I think relying on the science and having the good foundation and understanding of physiology is key. And that's not to say I'm gonna, be closed minded about this. As new things come out, we learn more, and sometimes you have to adapt for sure. But I have yet to see a patient do poorly with a moderate protein diet that's higher in fat and lower in carbs.
So in the 2000s, we vilified protein. In the 2010s, we vilified fat. I say the 2020s, it's time to vilify carbohydrates finally.
Yes, I am on board with that. I was encouraged when the American Diabetic Association came out with recommendations as for a low carb diet being a therapeutic intervention for those patients, but it seems to have stalled since then.
Yeah,
um,
right.
but who knows? It's early in the decade. We've got time to
The,
change all that.
the president of the American Diabetes Association has type 2 diabetes, and she controls it with a low carb diet. And so that helps. Somebody asked me, I was on an interview the other day, and somebody said, do you think the American Heart Association will ever like embrace low carb? I'm like, unless there's somebody that has a vested interest in it. But they're, again, back to those ties to the pharmaceutical and big food, they're heavy in these groups that are supposedly all for trying to deal with chronic disease.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? There is a newer class of diabetic medications, SGLT2 inhibitors, which can induce ketonic state in the body. So we have diabetic patients on these medications. We do have to take them off and then start a lower carb diet so they don't go into ketoacidosis. However, there are a lot of studies going on now in the cardiology world about giving this class of medication to heart failure patients because we know the failing heart prefers ketones as a source of fuel. And it's just crazy to me that they want to give patients these medications, which have some very unpleasant side effects, including a lot of gynecological infections. They'd rather give patients these medications than put them on a carbohydrate restricted diet that could achieve the same thing, which is to have a higher amount of ketones in the body to fuel this failing heart.
Or they'll use MCT oil, or they'll do exogenous ketones or ketone esters to induce what metabolically you could do through carbohydrate restriction.
Exactly. It's a sad state when very simple and easy to perform dietary interventions are just completely ignored in terms of what can we supplement, what can we prescribe. It's just it's crazy. They're skipping right over the foundation.
Which is why the work you and Brian are doing out there in San Diego is so awesome. So I want to shift gears a little bit because in the keto world, you alluded to this earlier. It's kind of caught on. It's been pretty popular, and blame me, I put keto in a title of a book 6 years ago, and I'm not saying I started the keto trend, but I was a part of the beginning of the early days of it. And now everybody and their mama is a keto expert. I was looking the other day on the back of Keto Clarity at who my experts were, and you got people like Dominique D'Agostino. He was out there in 2013 when I was writing this, and Maria Emmerich and Richard Feynman, uh, Mary Newport, David Perlmutter. I mean, these are people that you would know, but now we've got a lot of new kids on the block. Some of them not kids, but new people that have come around that I never heard of before. They popped up on the scene, and they don't always say the right things because they can be very misleading. You alluded to that earlier as well. What's going on there? Do you think
Yeah.
they're good intentions, or do you think they're just in it to make a buck?
No, that's a great question. And I mean, you were one of the founding people that helped bring the keto movement to light and the people that you listed as resources as well. I mean, those are the people who I trust. They know the science. They started this before it was popular, before there was money to really be made off of it. And now we have almost a whole new industry of health coaching that was not around 10 years ago either, at least to the extent. And the certifying bodies as to who can call themselves a health coach is very loose, right? You can find any online course, you can find it like a weekend seminar, and boom, suddenly you are a health coach, and that's not necessarily regulated. So we have seen quite a few quote keto experts pop onto the scene, and I want to believe their intentions are good, that they're trying to help people. Most of them have had a transformative experience themselves and they want to get the message out. But I do think there are also those who see this as an opportunity to be a star on social media, who see it as a way to get out of their 9 to 5 job and promote their own health coaching services or their own practice or what have you. So it does make me nervous that there is some bad information being floated. I want to say I like to believe in the good in people and think they're
Right.
just unaware, but unfortunately, I think we've seen that isn't always the case.
Well, I try to tell people, look for who is willing to help you for free. And I know certain people that if you reach out to them, they'll either ignore you or they'll say, here's my package to go buy to learn more about. And it's like, okay, they're not vested in you. Like, I can't tell you how many hours upon hours a day I spend giving free content, answering people's questions directly, giving them links to podcasts or something of one of my colleagues in this industry has done that can help them. Like, that's what it should be all about. Unfortunately, not everybody has that heart.
You're absolutely right. And that's it. You can tell who just wants to improve the lives of other people. And they do put out more free content. And as you know, and my gosh, your Instagram is fantastic and your social media presence and your Instagram live and everything, it is a full-time job to
Yeah.
put out free content. It really is. And it's like when I have time in between patients or at night, yeah, I'll try to put together some posts that I think might benefit people. But it is a labor of love, right? And not everyone has that or the knowledge to be doing it.
Yeah. And one of the trends that I've seen, and it's not many of them, is doctors are kind of hesitant about being online. And I noticed on your Instagram page, lifestyles greater than meds, can't give medical advice. I assume you had to put that in there because people would be asking, well, I see MD after her name. I can ask her any medical issue I want. And it's like, there's a lot of doctors that wouldn't even put themselves online like you do and Brian does. Dr. Tro does, Adam Nally does. Like, there's a limited number. Eric Westman is on social media, but he never looks at it. He doesn't know what he's doing. But
Yeah.
it's a hesitation there. What's the fear?
Oh, litigation. And it's unfortunately so common these days, but the litigation is first and foremost probably. And then two, doing a disservice to the patient too. You can only relay so much over an Instagram message or a Twitter tweet, and you're not really getting the whole background. I mean, to get a full idea of what's going on with the patient, you need their history, their family history, their social habits, their medications, and you just can't provide thorough and ethical care over social media. But really, the fear is what we're promoting on social media. If someone has a bad outcome, they say, well, this doctor on Instagram told me this was fine, that opens us up for lawsuits. And there's not a whole lot of common sense sometimes. And we can't, I try to be vague in general. And I feel bad when people ask me direct questions and I have to tell them they need to check with their doctor or I'll point them towards some resources. But it is a fear of repercussions in a legal aspect from your colleagues and just doing a disservice to the patient.
Well, look what happened to Tim Noakes in South Africa just a few years ago. All he did was one tweet that said you should try to wean your baby on a low carb, high fat diet. And it's like, that's all he wrote. And for like 3 years, they ruined that man's life. They like ran him through the mud. I know Nina Teicholz went over there to testify in the courtroom. And at the end, he was exonerated. But by that point, millions of dollars worth of legal bills, and just they ruined his life because he dared to say something positive about low carb.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, Twitter seems to be the worst. I don't know, the trolls that are on there, it's like, I feel like they have people that are trying to get doctors in the low carb movement in trouble, reporting them to the medical boards and just completely destroying them on other social media platforms and their reviews and reporting to their medical board and their hospital. It has gotten out of control. It's so apparent that they feel threatened by how big this has become and how many patients' lives are improving. And more doctors are getting on board with this.
Yeah, I know Brian's on Twitter. I don't really like Twitter. I'm on there, but I don't really like it. But I can say things a little more freely, just being the everyman. I don't have letters after my name that I have to worry about. It's one reason why people are like, are you going to go get like a medical degree or go get some kind of degree? I'm like, I don't want no letters after my name. I want to be able to keep talking.
Yeah, that is a nice freedom that you have. I gave Twitter a try for a few months and I was like, I'm done. I am done with Twitter. Yeah, it is. It is nice though to be able to speak without fear of a lawsuit or, a patient trying to make you diagnose them over two sentences. I feel like you're in a really powerful position to help people because you do have a little bit more flexibility.
There is this kind of people often write me and say, what program should I get to have legitimacy? I don't feel like I can really say anything unless I have letters after my name. And I always push back. I go, what letters does Jimmy Moore have after his name? They're like, oh, you're right. I don't need them. I can just talk. And I feel like with all the success stories, patients, I think if enough of them like speak out, and not everybody's articulate at talking, but if you can't talk right, if you can't write, support the people who do. There's always a role for people, and don't feel inadequate just because you don't have MD, RD, PhD, or any D after your name.
Right. And that kind of ties back into what we were discussing earlier. There are some people like yourself with no initials after their name that are a wealth of solid information and very helpful to this movement and the community. And it's a matter of trying to distinguish who is credible and who is not. Just because someone has letters after the name does not make them credible
Right.
either. Um, so I'd say it requires a little bit of homework on the part of the person inquiring, and really helping each other understand who is a good resource and who is in it for the wrong reasons.
I try to vet it out for people because I have so many people come on my shows, and I've had thousands of people, hundreds of doctors over the years. And so if they come on my show, you get to hear them in a very casual setting. Like today, you and I are just jibber jabbering here on Skype, and it's wonderful. We just get to have a nice conversation. They can see who you are, go look you up, and there's no pretentiousness there. What you see is what you get. And I've known Kristin for a little bit. We've talked on the phone before. So what you see is the real her. So let's back up to those people again that are kind of in this community and spreading misinformation. What are they saying that's wrong?
Right. So I think a lot of them, well, I'll tell you a red flag for me. When they start promoting keto foods, packaged foods, I'm not saying it immediately disqualifies them, but it makes me think, okay, is this how they are trying to make a living? Is this the first person who offered them some kind of affiliate or sponsorship? And what is it they're promoting? Now, there are some great products out there. Some people do need MCT oil, especially if we're trying to fight Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, for example. So a good quality MCT oil. I personally like collagen protein for the skin and hair and nail benefits. So I'm happy to promote a high quality collagen protein. But if you start seeing people promoting all types of junk, that is a red flag for me. So that's one thing. And just kind of asking them some basic questions. I'm not saying trying to trick them, but see if they understand what nutritional ketosis is, if they understand the physiology, if they've read any research, or if they're just kind of piggybacking off of what other people have said and done, and they're just repeating other people's ideas and opinions. So I think it becomes pretty transparent early on. And if they're really pushing an expensive product like their own program, there are some great programs out there and people will pay for them, but some are just absolutely generic that you can find for free on Diet Doctor or another website. So really trying to look at what angle, if they seem like they're really pushing for you to buy something, or if they're selling something, that's usually a sign they might not have your best intentions at heart.
and did they speak very well, and they're clear when they talk, and they have little boards and little this and little that, and they sound the part, and they have the letters after their name. Like, I can see, Kristin, why that's so alluring. Oh my gosh, this is a medical doctor, and he talks like me, and he understands me, and he's engaging. I say he generically, it could be a she. Engaging, and likes to be on video, and likes to really write, and and always. And so they become almost these gurus that people then follow. And so I hate guruism, just in general. Don't follow people, follow ideas. And so if you follow ideas, when the people fail, and they will, then you've got the idea to hold tight to. And I have a fear that as keto starts to fall out of popularity in the mainstream, it's on its way down now. It had its high a couple of years ago, and now it's on its way down. Still popular, still people doing it, and still lots of need for patients like coming to see you guys. But in the mainstream, it's going to die down. What's going to happen to those gurus? And that's what I keep asking. Like, I keep wondering, okay, these are the people that are the tried and true that I knew and were around back in the day. Some of these are even gone now. Dr. Seafried is still around. But then all these new people, where are they going to go? Are they just going to here? Are they going to go to the next trend to try to make money off of that trend? And the dirty little secret, I'm going to tell on them, not saying their names, but the dirty little secret is some of these people that came into this community came from a low-fat kind of style diet before. And now, oh, that didn't work anymore. Let's come over to this. We can make some hay with this. And so, buyer beware, just be eyes wide open and look for legitimacy. What would you say are the key qualities? You've already mentioned a few of them, but other key qualities for people that are lay people to look out for?
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point, looking at a person's background. And I'm all for evolving your thinking as new research comes out, and just experience you learn a lot from. But you can tell the people who one minute are pushing a plant-based diet and then the next minute they're pushing carnivore, right? So kind of blowing with the wind, no matter what's trendy right now, that is a major red flag. As far as qualifications, I want to see, like you said, time tested. I want to see that they've had this way of thinking for a while, that they've had some personal experience with it, that they follow that lifestyle themselves, and that they have other people that can vouch for them, testimonials, things that, real patients or clients that they have helped. And just kind of looking at their character. I mean, you can tell pretty easily, especially on social media, who wants to be a star and who does not, who's doing it just out of the goodness of their heart, trying to help people, and who's doing it for their own 5 minutes worth of fame. And I trust people's opinion there. I think they can tell pretty quickly who is legit and who is just trying to bump their own ratings and sales and all of that.
I'll tell you another one that's a big telltale, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this. So when the exogenous ketones became a thing, I remember talking to Dominique D'Agostino way back in 2012. He's like, dude, there's going to be drinkable ketones. I'm like, that sounds kind of weird, Dom. Why would you want to drink ketones? Your body can make them. Oh, man, it's going to be great for the Navy SEALs, because he was doing some of the research with them at the time. And it's going to help people, and And I'm just thinking, I don't understand why you would want this, except maybe in targeted circumstances, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, like you mentioned earlier, and the other uses of an acute need for ketones. But just drinking them willy-nilly on a daily basis and then marketing them as the way to lose weight, that's another red flag.
Yes, that is a huge red flag. And I think there's a big distinction between doing ketosis or needing ketones for medical reasons, for epilepsy, for Parkinson's, for Alzheimer's. And then there's another sector of people who are doing a ketogenic style diet to lose weight. And that seems to be the majority of people, at least at this point. They're doing it to lose weight. And they absolutely do not need to be drinking ketones. Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the Navy SEALs because I know Rob Wolf has done a lot of work with Navy SEALs as well. And he's more paleo. He's definitely open to ketogenic and carnivore diets, but he really started in the paleo world. And I've actually I have a friend who's a Navy SEAL who has completely transformed from paleo to keto to carnivore. And, someone who's been through a lot of injuries. And I will tell you, he is now pain-free, and he's had a lot of neck issues, shoulder issues. You can imagine orthopedic issues after being in the Navy SEALs for over a decade, and they've all resolved with a proper diet. And he's not doing that by drinking ketones. He's doing that by eating the foods we were intended to eat that are anti-inflammatory, that are low in carbohydrates, that are very nutrient dense. And you can't supplement your way to optimal health through ketone drinks or ketone packaged foods and expect to get the same results.
Well, and I mean, they're so fleeting. Like I've done plenty of tests, little N=1 tests to see how long they last in my system. It's 90 minutes at best. And so, okay, maybe if I wake up and I'm kind of groggy, I'm not feeling great, and I kind of need a boost, maybe I drink some ketones before doing a podcast so I have energy. I always have energy for podcasts, by the way. I don't ever not have energy. So it's just a product of the diet. But like, I feel like people are looking for shortcuts, and that's humanness. Everybody wants to do that. Human nature kind of pushes them to let me get to from here to there in the shortest way possible. So they see EKs, they see all these little shortcuts to get to there. But in the shortcut, you miss some of the advantages that come from doing it the right way.
Exactly. And it so often what you're eliminating in your diet is just as important as what you're including. And getting rid of processed food and sugar and the inflammatory seed oils, those really make a huge difference. And you can't be, chugging canola oil and drinking your ketone drink and thinking you're going to have good health. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, when the exogenous ketones first came out, and they were like, eat all the carbs you want and drink our ketones, and you'll be in ketosis anyway. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, and it's crazy, and that is the downside of keto becoming mainstream is you have all these people who are now trying to monetize it, and the food industry is definitely going to try to work their way into it
Oh,
too. And it's really a shame that people are led to believe that these keto-friendly foods and drinks are going to promote optimal health because they're not.
yeah. I knew keto had jumped the shark when Slim Fast created their line of keto products.
Oh, yes, I've seen those keto slim fast shakes and look at that ingredient list and it's appalling.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, that is for sure.
So, Kristen, what role does fasting play in a healthy kind of lifestyle? And should you fast before you're keto adapted to help you get keto adapted? I get this question a lot. That's why I'm asking you. And I have my own thoughts on this. Or should you get keto adapted and become fat adapted before you attempt fasting?
And I think there's no right or wrong answer here. Personally, I think you'll have a more pleasant experience if you become fat adapted and then go into fasting. Um, as you know, once you're fat adapted, you can naturally go longer periods of time without food. Your body has your fat stores to um, generate ketones to use for fuel. So you don't get that hunger. And not saying you'll never be hungry, but you can go 16 hours naturally without feeling intense hunger or getting hangry. However, if you want to start a fast, you will get into ketosis quicker, probably, but you're probably going to feel pretty darn miserable
Yeah.
in the process. So, in my practice personally, I don't recommend fasting. Usually not until we hit at least like 6 or 8 weeks. And even then, I don't always recommend it. I'm definitely not a fan of snacking and eating all day long. I think we should try to stick to meals and figuring out how much protein and fat we need to feel satiated to get us through to the next meal. But yeah, fasting, you can absolutely have a healthy, whole foods based ketogenic diet and be very successful and achieve optimal health without fasting. Fasting is another tool in the toolbox, but
Yeah.
I do think it's much easier once you're fat adapted.
I do love that TRE, time restricted eating, is becoming a thing in the research world. It's like all the rage now. Every study I'm looking at, they're referring to TRE. I read one yesterday about meal timing and sleep timing, determining body fat percentage. I did a Jimmy Rants on that yesterday. And in there, they were kind of poo-pooing on TRE, but they're like, well, we really need to examine it more. And I'm like, examine it more then. Don't sit there and dismiss it without examining it. But I think you're right. It kind of happens naturally when you eat in a state of ketosis. What about kind of pushing the window a bit to say 72, even up to a week or so of fasting? I know Dr. Steve Finney is not a fan of that. That man back there does not like longer fasts, whereas you have Jason Fung, who has medical supervision of fasting patients. Where do you fall on the extended fasting?
So my thinking has really changed throughout the past couple years with this, and I think it's very individual. If it depends on the person's goals first and foremost. If someone has a debilitating autoimmune disease and they're just changing into a low carb lifestyle, I do think there's some benefit for extended fast in terms of reducing inflammation. If someone is severely diabetic or a high degree of insulin resistance, and they're willing to try it, okay, fine. I will say I do worry, depending on the person's age. Once they get older, we start worrying a lot about sarcopenia as well, which is muscle loss, and just their digestive health too. And I don't particularly like extended fast for the geriatric population, and I don't like extended fast for women of childbearing years. I've
Right.
seen in my clinical practice now a lot of hormone dysfunction from extended fast.
Wow.
Um, so those would be kind of two areas or two groups of people that I would hesitate to do longer fast. And then I think the others, it's more of a personal preference. What I don't necessarily like or that I do worry about is when someone does a 72-hour fast leading up to it, they think, okay, I can eat whatever I want, and then I'm going to fast for 3 days. Then they break their fast and eat whatever they want, and it develops into a pattern of pretty disordered eating. It's like basically binging and purging, but instead of purging, you're fasting. And I think a lot of people are attracted to a low carb diet because it controls hunger and they're less likely to have binging episodes. And binge eating disorder is the number one eating disorder in this country. So, doing something that could lead to disordered eating in certain people makes me very hesitant to recommend it. But there are plenty of people who I think do it responsibly. They eat a low carb diet leading into it. They come out of it and they're not ravenous and they can control their food consumption. And I think it's great in that segment.
I can tell you from my experience of doing a lot of long fasts, I've gone as long as 21 days in a row, and I've done a lot of like 1 week fasts, 3 to 5 day fasts. Uh, Once you get to like day 3, there's such this euphoria about it that it's just easy and almost as if you don't feel like you have to eat again. You will, but you don't feel like you have to. And it's kind of beautiful because then I measure ketones and I see them like 5.8 and blood sugars down in the 60s and even upper 50s. It's kind of it's a weird feeling that unless you go there, and I get it, not everybody can do that, but for people that can and are willing to, it's helpful. I know I interviewed somebody, I think it was Dr. William Davis one time of Wheat Belly fame. And he said people that have a higher lipoprotein little a, which is one of those kind of advanced cholesterol markers that people run, if you have a higher level of lipoprotein little a, you're actually the one that's going to out survive everybody in the tribe and can fast longer than anybody. But I thought that was interesting. And I have tended to have higher lipoprotein little a over the years. And so maybe that's a marker to look at to see if you can fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is so much individual response and genetic makeup and the epigenetics. Some people do great fasting, like you've done all these extended fasts and have had success and feel great. There are some people who can't even go 24 hours without feeling absolutely miserable. And I think there is a lot more to it than what we currently understand. And I'm a big advocate for people eating intuitively and being in tune with what is true hunger versus, what's a desire to eat, what's a craving, and so on. But, eat when you're hungry and then stop, right? Don't be snacking and grazing all day. If you can go 24, 48 hours without feeling true hunger, go with it. I have no problem with that. If it's something you feel like you're constantly forcing and it's taking over your life because every minute you're thinking about food, it's probably not good for you. Not that it wouldn't have health benefits, but it's not a good fit for you at that stage in your life or that time period. Or if it's, high stress, I think it's much, much harder to fast, depending on your environment and your stress levels. I think if
Uh,
you're, at the office working all day, it might be very easy. If you're stuck at home working and the kitchen is 10 feet away and you're hungry, it's a lot harder to resist.
yeah, my kitchen is literally 10 feet away from me right here, but I don't have any crap in my house, so I'm not worried about it. It's all meat and eggs in my house. So, uh,
Perfect.
so last question. One of the questions I get from people is, I don't show ketones anymore, so why am I not in ketosis? And I think, and I'm sure you've seen this over the years looking at your patients, that maybe at first when they test, they see, moderate kind of elevations in their ketones within that nutritional ketosis range. But then over time, as they become fat adapted, the body gets very efficient at making the amount of ketones that it then goes and uses. And so when you prick your finger and get a blood reading or blow into a meter, you're not really getting any kind of reading. And people freak out about that. That's normal, right?
Yes, yes. And this kind of piggybacks into what we were talking about earlier. You don't have to check your ketones all the time, right? It is a helpful tool when you're starting to know if you're actually in ketosis, but that's exactly right. Your body's going to get efficient at using ketones and producing ketones. Pay attention to how you feel, how your energy is, how your appetite is controlled, how your performance is in the gym or with your sport, and that should guide you. And again, unless you're using it for something specific like epilepsy or Parkinson's, or an autoimmune disease. But people have used ketone meters and every other product to check ketones as a way to monetize this movement too. So, and another thing I like to point out, when you're checking your ketones, that doesn't necessarily mean you're burning your own body fat. As we talked about too, with like MCT oil, you can eat junk and still produce ketones, but that doesn't mean you're burning your own body fat. That means you're burning the fat that you just ingested. So I do think there is some utility in checking ketones, but I really encourage people not to go chasing ketones after they've been fat adapted after like that 3 month mark, unless it's for medical reasons, because they're going to get discouraged. Like you said, they're going to be frustrated that they're not seeing high ketone levels once they're fat adapted, and it just is an added source of stress.
So for me, it is an added source of stress. Thank you for mentioning that. To me, if you have clear head, lots of energy, no hunger, a general feeling of contentment, you're in ketosis. Like, let's just be honest, guys. You wouldn't have all that if your hormones were out of balance, if you had blood sugar dysregulation. It would be evident physically on your body. So pay attention to your body, which, oh yeah, by the way, that's what doctors used to do with patients rather than looking at labs. They looked at the patient. I know you guys look at your patients, but it's a lost art kind of paying attention to those subjective measures of health.
Yes, exactly. You don't want to treat a lab value. You want to treat the patient as a whole. And, ketone levels are another lab value. And again, they can provide some utility, but pay attention to the things you just mentioned. How's your hunger? How's your energy? How's your mental clarity? Those are much better predictors of health and wellness than a number on a ketone meter.
That's right. Guys, that's Dr. Kristin Baier. Go follow her over on Instagram because she's scared of Twitter. Doctoring Keto. I'm kidding. I'm scared of Twitter.
Oh, it's true. I am scared of Twitter. I'm done with Twitter.
But go check her out over at low-carb-md-san-diego.com. Kristin, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun, Jimmy.